Welcome, everyone. I'm Brainerd Carey. Of course, I'm the director of Praxis Center for Aesthetics, and today I'm giving a talk on meeting collectors, how to meet collectors, techniques, tactics, how to, where, and also befriending collectors and how to build relationships with collectors. So to begin with, I want to tell a story, and I also want to tell you guys, of course, maybe to just begin with this, thank you all for being part of this tribe. What I really appreciate is the way you all support each other, comment on each other's posts. I think that makes everyone feel welcome, and also as artists, it's kind of solitary experience, right? It can often be lonely. We need support in a variety of ways, not just career tactics, but also people responding to what we do. So when I see students posting a question and then I see multiple people responding before I even get to it, it's just thrilling for me because that's what support is about. And I think for all the artists, obviously, that are getting that kind of feedback and getting responses, it's wonderful. It's comforting. It's what this tribe's about. It's what this group's about. There's obviously nuts and bolts in here, like this lecture that I'm giving today, but the support that you're all giving each other through this group and responding to each other's responses and questions, it's a group, it's a tribe, it's a community, and that's how we get things done. When you see other people in here who have gotten shows or grants or residencies, it's inspiring, right? When you see people struggling, something didn't work, and why didn't it, and how to kind of retool their approach. That's also inspiring and exciting to see. So thank you all for commenting, for being part of this community, for being part of this tribe and supporting each other. At the end of this talk, which should be about 20 minutes or so, I'll answer all your questions. And also, as always, if you have suggestions for other talks, let me know, because I do these live talks pretty much every Friday. There's other experts that come in and out too, but you can always suggest talks, and I'll pursue those topics and give you a talk on that. Okay, so today we're talking about collectors, right? How to find them, how to find these wealthy people with means that can purchase your art. And I gave a talk about this last week, and I'm going to kind of summarize that talk as well, but I want to talk about one story that first got me into this whole idea of what it means for an artist to survive off finding collectors and sales. And the way this happened was when I first met my wife, she had a boyfriend before me who was an artist, lived in New York. I met him, and we were at a show together. My wife was performing, and she said, "Oh, he's here. You should go meet him and tell me what you think." So I went down, sat with him in the first row, and I said, "Hi, how you doing? I'm Brainerd. What is it that you do?" He said, I'm an artist. I paint." And I said, "Oh, that's great. What kind of art do you make?" He says, "Oh, I make very beautiful paintings. The kind of things that no one's ever really seen before." And I said, like what? What kind of work? And he said, "Well, I do a variety of things." He said, "But I also do things that people can't even buy. I do outdoor pieces, and they're environmental, and nobody can even see them unless they're from up high. And the way I make them is I ride on my horse, and I spread pigments onto the organic pigments onto the snow, and if I ride around and I do this for a few hours, sometimes longer, I make a painting that slowly disappears in time, but everybody can see it from a variety of angles, especially from high up." And he said, "I think of it as really like a painting for the gods." And I said, "Wow, that's interesting." And he said, "And I also, of course, make drawings and paintings that you can see in my studio. They're equally as beautiful, and that's what I do. I love what I'm doing, and I think the work that I'm making is very beautiful and unlike anything I've ever seen in my life." So I said, "Okay," and then I said, "Thanks." I got up and I went to speak to my wife, then my girlfriend, and she said, "What did you think of him?" And I said, well, he seems like he's the greatest artist in the world, making some of the most beautiful work that's ever been made. And she said, oh, yeah, that's him. That's him. So not long after that, continued to kind of see him every now and then. When we had a child, we went over to visit him. We were in Chelsea in New York. He wasn't far for them, living in Midtown. And he had a pretty nice apartment. It was kind of an old building, but it was a duplex. He had a studio on the bottom and kind of artist living space on the top. You know, it really looked like kind of an artist's dream, right? It was a lot of retail space in New York. Not retail space. It was a lot of living space in New York. And it was kind of eccentric, really. You know, he had always wore the same clothes, dressed kind of like an impoverished artist. On the first floor where his studio was, he had a couch where he said he was letting a homeless person sleep every now and then, because he said, you know, the homeless, you know, where are they going to go? And then we looked at his studio and his work, and he was a guy that talked a lot about himself and his own work, not unlike that first conversation I had with him. And so I began asking him, you know, how do you sell work? What happens? Because he was single, but he was also divorced. He had his ex-wife was living in France, as well as his two children. He was supporting those two kids and his wife with alimony payments and child support payments that he was required to pay. And he did all that through selling his art out of his studio. And he didn't have any exhibits in New York, didn't have any galleries that were selling his work. He did have one exhibit in New York, but he didn't sell anything at the exhibit. He was upset at the exhibit because they closed shortly after his show, and it took him a lot of work to put together. But meanwhile, he was making a living out of what he was doing in his studio. So I asked him, how are you doing this exactly? Then, as now, I'm interested in how different artists manage their careers. And in his case, it was kind of fascinating, right? So because also he's a self-taught artist, never went to art school. Most of his work was abstract, often used found materials, paint on the street, house paint, all kinds of stuff. But you know, the canvases were nice looking. They were abstract works. Sometimes he would do some figurative works, but not very often. And so his method was fairly simple, he told me, and fairly straightforward. He said, I go wherever I think there are wealthy people. He said, in New York, in big cities, that means those fancy hotels and the bars they have. You know, the Ritz-Carlton, I don't know, all the hotels in New York that are very, very expensive to get into. He said, anybody can go to the bars there. He said, and I don't really drink, but I go into the bar, or I have a non-alcoholic drink, and I try to meet wealthy people. I look for men, women who, to me, look wealthy by the suits they're wearing, by the watches they're wearing, the jewelry, and I strike up a conversation. And I ask them, you know, what they're doing in New York, and they tell me, you know, they're here on business, or they're here for, you know, something else, vacation. And he said, and then I tell them a little bit what I'm doing. I'm an artist, and as I told you earlier, he talks about his work in not any kind of deprecating manner. He talks about his work as though he's making some of the most beautiful work in the world. And I'm not saying you have to be that kind of, you know, talk about yourself that way. But, you know, there's a number of ways you can talk about your art. You can talk about it in kind of a flat way. I'm an artist. I make paintings. They're abstract. They tend to be on a kind of large scale. And I also do drawings. They're all non-figurative, you know. You can talk about it like that. You could talk about it even, you know, bringing it down even further, like, well, I'm an artist, you know, I'm doing other things on the side. My art career is something I'd like to grow more, but at the moment, I'm doing the work that I can do to support my art career, and I'm painting when I can. And then there's talking it up even more, the way, so that's like flat, right? Kind of the first example I gave you was talking about your art in kind of a passive way. I'm an artist, I make work, you know, abstract or figurative, that's what I do, paintings mostly, oil on canvas or whatever it is. And the other way is talking about it even, you know, as though you're struggling more. And then the other way is the way he talked about his work, which is, I'm an artist. I make paintings. I make beautiful paintings that are abstract, but they're as much about my soul as they are about the soul of the world. You know, in an impassioned way, saying my work is something that communicates to other people, is something that helps other people heal themselves, because that's what beauty does. It helps us all heal in some ways and get over the sorrows that we're all struggling with, right? 3 different ways of talking about your work. Either passive and kind of monotone, either below that, I'm struggling and kind of putting yourself down, or the highest level, kind of, my work is here to change the world. My work is beautiful. It's something that I'm proud of. It's something I'm enthusiastic about. Okay, so he goes around to wealthy bars in New York, and I'm going to give you a method that's you know, a little less maybe out of your comfort zone than this, perhaps. But this is how he made a full-time living and supported 2 kids and a wife, so that he was divorced from. So he would say that to them, and you know, in a conversation at a bar while he's drinking juice or a non-alcoholic drink, talking people up. Cost him nothing to be there, really, right? Except the cost of a non-alcoholic drink. And then he'd say, I'd love you to come to my studio. Would you like to come by? He'd exchange cards with them. He said, you know, bring your wife or bring your husband. I'd love to show you around. You can just take a look at the work and I'll show you what I do. It's not about purchasing the work. It's just about looking at the work. I'd love to show you. So, you know, he was already kind of giving them a break. It's not saying, come on over and maybe you'll buy work, or, you know, just the assumption is that they might buy work. It's come over. It's not about buying the work. I want to show you what an artist does. I want to show you what I do. Now, for people who haven't been to an artist studio, it's really kind of an exotic invitation. For one, artists are kind of exotic beings to anybody who's not one. And it's something that can easily, of course, slip by you because you don't feel like such an exotic creature to yourself. But for business people, for people of wealth, of means, an artist is someone who's completely going against the tide, going against everything they know of how to exist in the world. If you're into finance and money, you're trying to find a way to make more, to meet a market's demand, to please your boss, whatever it is. An artist is someone who's making up their own rules, and they're making art that they want to see for themselves, that they feel will somehow benefit the world in many cases. And so in that case, you know, it's kind of such an odd thing to understand as a wealthy person, as a person who's not in the arts, because they wonder, what is your motivation? You're making this work and some of it doesn't sell. You have a side job that supports this, and you're not trying to meet the demands of a market. You're just making this work. It's exotic. It's hard to understand. So an invitation to his studio is an exciting one. Whether you're a tourist in the city, whether you're you know, on business, it's like, sure, if this seems safe and he seems like a nice guy, whether you're a woman or a man, you can do this. Invite 2 people over. If you feel as a woman or a man that this is unsafe for you, inviting strangers to your home, have someone else there. You know, why not? So, okay, to continue this story, he invites people over to his home, his studio. He brings them in. He always has a little bread there, a little you know, cheese, and some grapes and some wine, some inexpensive wine, right? He offers that to them right away. You know, insists they have some wine. Already it feels kind of European and special and a little exotic. And then he talks to them about his work. These abstract paintings, which nobody understands anything about that's coming over there. And he tells them about how he painted them. Often, you know, he talks about stories around them. I made this painting when I was going through, you know, a breakup with my girlfriend, or when I was doing this or that. And then he turns to them and he says, you know, have you ever experienced something like that? Like when you're breaking up and you're not sure where to turn and you feel a little lost? You know, and then he waits for them to respond. Yeah, that's happened to me. And he says to him, and do you remember the feelings that you had then? And waits, and they tell him a little bit about the feelings they had then. He's engaging them. He's not just lecturing them. Suddenly he's engaging them on emotional terms. And they're looking at a painting that's completely abstract, right? Looks like cracked wallpaper or something, and a pattern that's kind of, you know, damaged and falling apart. A lot of his work looked like that, like sort of decaying, um, you know, surfaces. And suddenly they're getting into it. They're applying their own experiences to it. And he would do that through every work. He would tell a little bit of a story. Oh, this is when I was going through a difficult time with this kind of person, or this is when I was rejected, you know. And rejection's tough. Have you ever been rejected by like a job or something? And he'd ask them and pause and wait till they say something, you know, or he'd compliment them and he'd say, you know, this is about someone that I met who had beautiful eyes. You don't see their eyes here, you know, but this painting is about their eyes. And then he'd look at them and he'd say, you know, have you ever met someone that you just thought had the most beautiful eyes? Again, okay, this was part of his charm. And I'm not saying this is exactly what you have to do, but this was his method, and it worked, right? He was making full-time living off his work, really selling a lot. 5 by 5 foot canvas was $10,000. He was selling them on a regular basis by doing just what I'm saying. So again, his method was, and he had a duplex in New York, and like I said, he was supporting 2 kids in another country, as well as his wife, who he was divorced from. And he would talk a lot about his work in enormously positive terms. This is not a guy that doesn't struggle, because he seemed to me initially when I met him, and of course I was a little biased because he was my girlfriend and now my wife's, who's now my wife, ex-boyfriend. He was, you know, I saw him as self-obsessed. And, you know, that's okay. It wasn't obnoxiously so. I had a bias to him then, of course, but I was also fascinated by how he was making a full-time living doing what he does. So, so that's his story. And again, the story was going to bars at very fancy hotels in New York. He probably dressed up a bit. You know, maybe you could dress like me, you know, if you're a man or a woman, a little more formally. So, so you fit in with that crowd. I wouldn't go with a total artist dress, though as an artist, you can take a lot of license there, of course, but dress for the occasion. You're going to a beautiful place and you're sitting at a bar alone and you're ordering a non-alcoholic drink, a juice of some kind, and you're striking up conversations with people who are wealthy. That's what people do at bars. What else are they going to do? Look at their phone all day? It's a place to meet people. Then he would invite them back to his studio, as I was saying earlier in this talk, and explaining exactly how that happens. And then at his studio, he'd have a little food, grapes, you know, bread, cheese, wine. And after a couple glasses of wine and talking to them about how he makes his paintings and the emotional states that he went through when he was making these, whether it was rejection or beauty, and then always turning to the person he's talking to and saying, have you ever had an experience like that? And they have, because he's talking about universal emotions: sadness, rejection, joy, failure, frustration, triumph, love. You know, these are things we've all experienced or have a sense of to different degrees. And as they responded, they start relating to his work just by the emotional tenor of what he's saying and what they're saying. And then he tells them the cost of it and how a painting like this will continue to kind of remind you of those emotions and heal you in a way. Because when we look at our emotions and in our triumphs and tribulations and failures, it helps us to grow and to move beyond them. You can see the whole experience is kind of exotic for people, right? You're going to this guy's studio, he's talking to you about feelings. You've never talked about this in someone's party before. This art is now connected to those feelings, and if you buy this, it'll help you manage that and remind you of those moments that are so precious and intimate to you. Okay, that's one story, method number one. Now I want to go over what I was saying last week in a video, which is another way to meet collectors. Maybe that whole method isn't for you. So here's another method. Wherever you are, whether you're outside a major city or in a major city, in Europe, in the US, anywhere in the world, there's most likely a museum somewhere near you, right? If there's not a museum, whatever a major nonprofit space is. But let's talk about museums. If you're in New York, obviously there's MoMA, Guggenheim, Whitney, New Museum. If you're in LA, you know, LACMA, there's tons of them all over the place, right? In all big cities. And if you're not in a big city, you can travel a bit to go there. Here's the method. When you go to a museum, go to the membership desk. There's a few ways you can join a museum and be a member. One of them is as an artist member, like at MoMA. The artist membership is cheap. It's $35 a year. You get invited to the openings and a few, you know, other events. And then there's different levels above that. You know, family, special membership, and it starts going up, 50, 100, 200, 300. The membership levels, when they go up, bring you into an inner circle of membership for the museum. And there's a reason museums do this, and there's a reason I would encourage you to do this. When you buy a membership at a museum, and whatever museum is near you, I would begin this process by just going there to the membership desk or calling them and asking them, what do you get for the different membership levels? So let's say you go to MoMA or LACMA or another museum, and you ask them about the membership levels, and they tell you, well, for 100 a year or 200 a year, you get these private parties, these openings that are just for exclusive members before the public sees this opening. And oftentimes there are multiple levels at this. So whether you're paying 100 or 500 a month, you might get invited to the same kind of exclusive pre-opening. You know, there's different perks for each level. But the thing about this is, when you subscribe for $100 or $200 to a museum membership, you go to these pre-openings and there's a group of collectors there. There's a group of wealthy museum patrons there. And the reason museums host these is because they want to cultivate those patrons to give even more money. Museums, once they have a certain amount of money from a patron, they want more and more and more. That's how it works until they reach the limit of what you could possibly give. So if you go to these events, and I've worked with artists who have done exactly this at MoMA, at Guggenheim, at the New Museum and the Whitney in New York City, as well as other cities, this is what happens. Let's say for $100 or $150 membership, you try it out and you're in the inner circle now. You get invited to an opening that's before it's open to the public. It'll be a small group there. They may serve wine in real glasses, and it's a little bit of a meet and greet. What should you wear there? Again, if you're a man, you could wear something as semi-formal as what I'm wearing now. If you're a woman, you could wear something that's the equivalent. You can certainly take artistic license here and wear like capes or something a little more exotic. That's fine, but look good, you know, look like you're not going to, you know, your friend's opening down the street. And then when you're at this particular type of event, there'll be a host at that event. And the host is someone from the museum who will have a badge on that says, you know, John, you know, Smith, Museum of Modern Art, LACMA, wherever it is. And you can go up to that host and you can say, hi, nice to meet you. I just joined at this level. And they'll say, oh, nice to meet you. What's your name? Brainerd Carrier. Great. What's your interest in the museum, or why are you here? And you can say, I'm here to meet other people who are interested in the arts. I'm an artist. And say, I was wondering if you could introduce me to some people. Just like that. Their job is to introduce people. That's what they do there, these hosts, right? So they'll likely, as has happened to me and other artists that have done this, take you around and say, oh, let me introduce you to a few people. Hi, this is so-and-so. You know, this is Brainerd. This is, you know, so-and-so. He's an artist. This person's, you know, the chairman of whatever. That's how you meet people. If there wasn't a host there, you can simply meet people with opening lines like, hi, I'm a new member here, and I just wanted to say hello. You know, they see you're alone. If, you know, I would strongly suggest you go to these things alone, as hard as that is to do, as opposed to with a partner, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, because when you're alone, you'll meet more people. When you're with someone else, you tend to get insulated, and you talk about things and you're working up courage to get out there. When you're alone, there's nothing else to do but talk to other people. This is a little more low pressure, right, than the whole bar scheme that that the guy I talked about at the beginning was doing. So again, joining museum at these upper levels, go to the membership desk, ask what you get for those levels, join, consider joining. And then when you go to these private events, you will see a host there. And if there isn't a host there, walk up and introduce yourself. Say, hi, I'm a new member. I just wanted to say hello. And then they'll say, hi, my name is James or Joan. And then say, what interests you about this museum in particular, or this show, because you'll be in a show. And then talk about art for a little while. You can then tell them you're an artist. They may ask you what kind of art you do. Talk about it as best you can in some glowing terms, or at least enthusiastically. And you can say, I'd love to have you over to my studio if you'd like to look. You could bring your husband or wife. Would you like to exchange information? Swap cards. If you don't have, be sure you get their card. Don't just give them yours. Or, or if they don't have a card, say, that's okay. Can I write down your email and I'll send you information? Take down their email. Then invite them. This is, there was other people who have talked about this method before. There are critics who have talked about this method that I've interviewed, that you join museum memberships at slightly higher levels and you begin to meet the inner circle of the art world in that whole area, the power players. Introduce yourself to them. You'll be one of the few artists there. Invite them to your studios. Keep in touch with them. Now, when you have a studio visit with one of them, and you'll invite them, they'll be excited to make a new relationship. When you have a studio visit with one of them, then it doesn't have to be about a sale that time. You can do just what I was talking about earlier in this talk, in terms of walking people through some of your work. Have some bread, have like a baguette, have a little grapes and cheese and wine in a nice, clean, beautiful wine glass, right? And give them a little wine. Talk about your work. And while you're talking about your work, talk about some emotion associated with it. This is just one level. There's a lot of ways to do a studio visit. But as I was saying, I made this when I was going through a difficult time. I was, my dog had died, and then you can turn to them and say, has that ever happened to you? Have you ever had an animal that's died? And, they'll mostly say, yeah. I say, do you remember the feelings you had when that happened? And they'll say, yeah, I do. Say, well, these are the feelings that I'm talking about here. And, you can make this up or not, or take it wherever you want. But that's one way to get people engaged. What were you going through at the time? The painting doesn't have to illustrate that. It could be figurative. It could be a joyous time that you went through. This is when I had just gotten a new apartment. I had just fallen in love. Do you remember the first time that you fell in love? You say to the person looking at it. You're an artist. Get them on emotional ground. That's exciting, because we don't usually hear those kind of questions from people, and we want to talk about those things in a safe way if we can. So then after that, you can tell them how much it is, and if they want to, if they want to buy this or not, and explain that they can pay in payments. If it's $5,000, they say, yeah, that's a little bit much for me. Say, well, you could have it for $200. What? Say, well, $200 down, and then we could work out a payment plan. I have more studio visits, but if you want this one, that's all it takes is a deposit. And if you ever have second thoughts, you can have that deposit back. I'm here to share something with you and to give you something that I think is beautiful and helpful and healing and that's exciting to them, right? So otherwise, you don't even have to talk about a sale. You can talk about it a little bit, and say, I'd like to have you back again when there's newer work. Would you like to come again? And most likely they'll say, yes, please invite me. It's not that the first visit has to be a sale. It's a relationship. You want them to come back again and again and again. So if someone doesn't comes to your studio the first time and doesn't buy, don't think it's a lost cause. Assume that they're going to come again. Okay. For today, that's my talk. I'm going to answer your questions. I know there's a lot of people here today. For those of you, if you're seeing this as a recording and not live, you can still ask questions in this thread. To summarize this talk, the beginning of this talk was a detailed description of a story about an artist who was my wife, girlfriend's, well, at that time she was my girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, and how he was making a full-time living off his art. Specifically, his method was going to very wealthy, very high-end hotels, going to the bars, having non-alcoholic drinks, and in a specific manner, inviting wealthy people to his studio. And again, if this is out of your comfort zone, be sure that you tell them they can invite a spouse or a friend with them, or two friends, and have someone there yourself if you're uncomfortable being alone in your studio or apartment or house with visitors. And I explained that whole process, how he sold them, engaged people emotionally, and was making a full-time living doing that. No other job, was supporting two kids and his wife, who he had divorced, in another country. The second method was joining museums, whether they're local to you, the biggest museums, or whether you have to drive an hour to them. Join at a higher membership level. Ask the museums what you get for different membership levels, and often for $100 or $200 a year, you will get a membership that will bring you into an inner circle. And that's how they will sell you the membership even. This is more exclusive. These are for our special members, and for that, they treat you more special. They have preview openings where there's not very many people there. And at those preview openings, as I discussed in this video, I'm just summarizing it for you now. At those preview openings is where you can meet people. There's a host there that can introduce you. The host will have a badge on from the museum department. And also you can meet people yourself. Go there alone is my suggestion. Walk up to people, say, hi, I'm a new member here. My name is Brainerd. Shake their hand, they understand. Everybody wants to make people feel comfortable, especially that are new to groups. And then engage them the way I described in this video, invite them to your studio. And this is how you find the wealthiest people that are interested in the arts, all the collectors that are near you. If there isn't a major museum, you could do this with whatever the local art center is near you. The bigger museums, of course, will have the wealthier people. Okay, that's my talk for today. Again, I want to thank you all for being in this group as members, part of this tribe, part of this wonderfully supportive group. I love answering all your questions, and even more, I love the way all of you are supporting one another. I think that's crucial to being an artist, and I really appreciate how generous all of you are with each other and comments with each other. Thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to answer all your questions. So ask away, and welcome here. Let's see. I'll welcome Marcia. Welcome Leslie. Yes, so glad you're here. Sarah, Diane, Gillette, Sarah, Joyce, Kip, great. Leslie, yeah, organic pigments from there, right? He was funny. Okay, a lot of funny comments too. Let's see, Sarupa, welcome. It's okay to laugh in a way, there's these things, laughed at the idea of the initial thing I was saying, but it works, right? You can adapt those kind of techniques to however you want to do it. But right, it's funny, probably because it's out of our comfort zones, but of course it works. So it makes me laugh too, but I mention it because it works. Okay, so Andy says, I'm not sure this is a good idea for a woman going to a hotel bar and giving away your card to a man. That's up to you. But as I'm saying, in order to feel comfortable doing this as a woman doing this, You can also say, come to my studio. You can meet my boyfriend. You can meet, my studio assistants, whatever it is, make yourself feel comfortable. You're going to very high-end museums. And again, I don't want to push you far out of your comfort zone, Annie. So I understand as a woman going into a bar, trying to meet other people for the business of having them come to your studio may feel uncomfortable. So either don't do it or do whatever it takes to make you feel comfortable and secure and powerful in that situation. Because letting them know that you're already involved or whatever it is important, because this isn't about building a romantic relationship. It has to be very clear that this is about your studio and your art and something special you have to offer. But feel free to ask me any other questions like that. I can see Annie said like having a specific day designated for a studio tour and inviting a group of people over with wine and whatnot. Less of a come-on vibe that way. Well, yes, that's true. However, a studio kind of visit with a group of people won't allow you to engage with the collector and build a relationship the same way. And if everybody's drinking your wine, they're having a little party, right, on you, and they may or may not buy. What you want to do is really have one-on-one relationships that develop. So when there's a little wine there or not, and you invite two people at a time, right, over, let's say, a husband or man and his partner, woman and her partner, or a friend, whatever it is, you're building a more intimate relationship. They're getting to know the artist. I'm not saying anything against group openings, whatever, but I'm sure you've all had, First Friday events, sometimes open studios, like art fairs, people just roam through there like they're shopping and they get free wine. There isn't often a relationship, an intimate relationship that's being built. And that's key to this process. Joyce, I'm fascinated by the story, but I feel it would be quite different if done by a woman. Yes, okay, so I addressed that a little bit. It would be different if done by a woman, but just as a professional woman can build professional relationships, you can, present yourself so that you're more or less protected against this seeming like a come on, right? Or that you're becoming vulnerable in this situation. So if that's not comfortable with you, do the museums, at that level. Maybe that's more comfortable, or do what you can to feel comfortable and empowered in a situation. Always have someone there in the studio when someone visits, and when they come over, have them bring someone with them, or they can come alone. But invite a friend over, another man or another woman, whatever makes you feel safe and secure to get around that. Because somehow, as a woman, getting individuals into your studio to look at your art, curators that are men, collectors that are men, and women, is essential. So we have to find a way around that so that you feel empowered, so that you feel safe, and that's completely understandable. But it's essential that we also find a way around that. And often that's just with inviting a friend or two over there so that you feel comfortable and protected. Okay. Joy says, when you do a payment plan, do they take the work at this visit? I had rich people who are very reluctant to pay. This gets very difficult since people often feel entitled to special treatment. Even, yes, okay, payment plans, they get the work when the payment plan is done, not before then. They don't want to pay the whole payment plan, then they don't get the work. And what I would do with payment plans, rather than saying, send me a check when you want, you can set it up with PayPal. You could create subscription buttons with PayPal. It's not hard to do. You could always ask someone who's more familiar with PayPal if you're having a problem with it, and you send them an invoice. And in that invoice, there's a button you click, and it says it's $100 a month. It'll automatically deduct $100 a month from their account. Yeah, you don't want to really be following up with people over something. You want the money to automatically come to you. So yeah, don't give them the art before they pay in full. It's like that with most payment plans, but that's what I would say. Thanks, Renee. And how important are business cards? Business cards are important. Why not? You know, good to have them. They can be fairly minimal, just with your name and email address on them. You don't have to have your website and address, and keep them minimal. Make them however you want. But I think they're important. Otherwise, all we have is our phones to put in the contact, which is okay. And sometimes people don't have cards, but then you have to say, "Can I have your email?" Put in their email. Cards make it a little bit easier. Okay, Kip, someone would appreciate discussing other options other than studio visits. That is not an option for me at this time. Well, other options are, if you're going to a museum and meeting people in any of the ways that I mentioned, you can keep in touch with them by email. Send them newsletters, send them updates, show them what's going on. I'll do another talk specifically about online sales, but it's still, you can build a relationship that way. If they can't come to your studio, okay, but somehow, Kip, it would be good for you to have work out so people can come, because it's harder for people to buy work without ever seeing it. I mean, if you're about to buy a painting, don't you think it's harder for you to buy it online without actually seeing the surface of that painting and how it's put together? It certainly would be for me. Maybe a watercolor or something else would be a little bit easier to buy online, but depending on the work, it's you want to see it. But Kip, certainly you can build relationships in the same way, and then build them online afterwards. Okay. Yeah. Is there a way to expand these upscale relationships into asking them for donations toward a project? I don't want to seem tacky or grabby, but I wonder if it skips an opportunity by excluding these people from such requests. Obviously not asking immediately, but later on in a letter. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. These are people who will become supporters of your work, and that could happen in a number of ways. As they get to know you, as they like what you're doing more, and they're learning from you, because that's the whole idea. They're learning from you. You might be a patron of a major museum and go to all their openings, but you still have no connection to artists, and that's part of the reason you joined. And you're only getting a connection through sort of docent tours and academic means. So absolutely, that would work. You could do that. Absolutely. And Isabel, yeah, as I was saying before, when you offer people work, a payment down, you do not give them the work right away. Only when they're done. Let's see, Diane. I don't understand the question. Isabel, okay, I got that. Feel free to ask again, but I just didn't understand your question, Diane, to do it for you. It's all about relationships, of course. And just like you went to that gallery in Sarasota and said, are you showing the work of new artists, and you got yourself a show there. That's how it happens. It's as simple as what you did, Diane, already. You were very brave to do that, and it worked, right? You have yourself a show now at a good gallery. So so Sarupa, for a payment plan, shouldn't there be some amount that is not refundable? I keep the art on hold for them and pay PayPal a percentage for incoming payment. Absolutely. All fees are not refundable, of course. You could also even tell people, and a number of artists, even galleries do this, say, when the payment plan is done, the work is purchased, here you go, money back guarantee. You don't like it in 30 days, exchange it. I will exchange it for anything else in my studio, or I'll give you your money back. These kind of policies make everybody feel comfortable. That's why Amazon does so well, and plenty of online retailers do so well. It's just, returns are easy to do. And with art, nobody really wants to make a return. It's very personal, but offering them a return, possibly, where they shipping isn't included in the return, fees of any payments aren't included in the return. You can make up whatever policy you want, but it gives people a level of comfort so that they can take on that risk, because it is a risk buying art. You buy the work, maybe your wife or husband or partner doesn't love it. You're not sure what it's going to feel like to live with this piece for 6 months or a year. Your policy can extend forever or 6 months. Some people say, you know, if you return this work after a month, you'll get a credit in my studio only, or whatever you want to say. But art isn't an easy thing to buy, so giving people assurances that that, you know, they're making the right decision, and if they ever feel that they're not, that they can come back to you, is important. Giving people a credit as a return is also important, because then you don't lose the money. They have to buy something else. Okay, but we have to figure out, Leslie, visit our group studio often house. That should be a little more palatable. Not quite sure I understand. She said, I get solicitations, DMs, or Instagrams from 20-somethings who can't see that I'm twice their age, but we have to figure it out. How about a whole group of women asking, visit our group studio? Yeah, that's okay. I mean, all those direct messages, you know, you can say, would you like to come over and visit my studio? You can take a guess on it. I mean, you know, however you want to handle that situation. But all the direct messages are, you know, are something you can then research. Look at who those people are. You see they're, you know, 20-something person that doesn't have much means and certainly isn't a collector, then don't invite them. You know, we're looking for specific kinds of people, and they're people who have the money to buy art, the sophistication and interest to buy art and appreciate what you're doing. So while you could do group shows and everything else, again, the problem with group studio visits, as I'm sure all of you experience, is it's hard to build the one-on-one relationship. Nothing against group shows, group studios, you know, open studios, but oftentimes it doesn't build that one-on-one connection that we're looking for here. Ivan, I'm a conceptual artist. Should I target only that niche? No, Ivan. When you go to different openings, like I'm saying, at MoMA, a lot of conceptual artists there too. There's not a kind of any difference between what you're doing and other people having studio visits. Even more so for you, they want to learn about what you're doing and how it works. And again, if you can use like the story I told earlier to get people to relate to experiences you've had when making the work, perhaps they'll begin to understand what you're doing. They'll begin to unlock and get what you're doing. So same niche, same people, same story for you, Ivan. Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Leslie, for that clarification. Those were all the questions. If I missed any, don't hesitate to ask in this thread, and I'll get to them. And I just want to end again by saying thank you all for being in this tribe, in this wonderful community. I love answering your questions, and what I love even more is how you all are active here and answer each other's questions. I love that I see, you know, 4 responses before I get to a question, and all of them are interesting and nuanced and have their own ways of supporting the question. So thank you all for your support of each other and for being in this community. And also, do not hesitate to suggest other topics that you'd like me to talk on, and I will post videos on those topics. Thank you again, all of you, for being here. It's a pleasure to be part of this community, director of this community, and it's an immense pleasure for me to see all of the love that you guys have for each other in the way that you support each other through comments and all the postings in this private group. Thank you all, and whenever you're listening to this, I wish you a wonderful day and great success in your studio. Thank you.